News cycles tend to slow down a bit in the summer, and so do we, taking vacation trips to the beach and more time out of our days to spend with family and friends, which can make it easy to miss the stories that do break during the warmer months. So, with just a few weeks to go until the unofficial start of fall, we're taking a look back at some of the big stories that might have fallen under the radar this summer, and some of the big ones we should look out for come the fall. Joining me with their takes are Gintautas Dumcius, the managing editor of the Dorchester Reporter, Steph Solis, the co-author of Axios Boston's morning newsletter, and our own GBH News State House reporter, Katie Lannan. Good to see you all. Thanks for doing this. Steph, let's have you kick it off. What is one big story that people might have missed during the summer that they should be cognizant of as we head into the fall?
So there are thousands of bills that the legislature has on the table every 2 years, and one that recently came to my attention is a bill to change the state liquor licensing laws. When you apply for a liquor license, you need to have a manager of record, but that manager cannot be a U.S. citizen. And this is something that a lot of restaurant owners don't realize until they're already applying for it.
Wait, the manager can or cannot?
Cannot.
The manager cannot be a...
can only be a U.S. citizen.
Can only be a U.S. citizen. Okay,
Yes.
Which is something, when you mentioned this, I had no idea that restriction was on the books.
Yes.
Bizarre.
So Senator Patrick O'Connor has a bill that would amend that. I think there's another bill by Senator Eldridge that's a little more wide-ranging. But both bills are sort of getting at this issue where non-citizens appear to have been excluded for the better part of a century.
Yeah, that's remarkable. And as a lot of our viewers will know, a whole lot of non-citizens working in the hospitality industry. So thanks for teaching me about this. I didn't even know that existed as an issue. Katie, what's your big story that people may have missed?
Yeah, so Adam, you and I have talked a lot about the state budget. There's been a lot of stories about how late this year's budget was and about some of the policies that are in it that are major on the education front. But underlying all that, we have last year's fiscal year closed short, or will close short. There's a gap there that will need to be closed. A lot of that money, somewhere to the tune of $600 million, is money that would have gone into a savings account, so it won't require spending cuts. There is somewhere around, depending on how the math ends up working out, what moves are made in the legislature, $39 to $177 million that will need to be solved for.
Chunk of change.
Yeah, and when you're talking about $39 billion with a B dollars in tax revenue, it's small scale, but it does create questions about what economic trajectory we're on. We still also, one story that was big at the start of the summer was that the state improperly handled $2.5 billion in unemployment payments.
And that's just sort of dropped off.
We haven't heard much about that since then. We don't know how that's going to be solved. And meanwhile, we have lawmakers who are still trying to work out how they're going to pass a tax relief bill to help out households across Massachusetts.
Business.
So, big questions there about what happens financially.
Gintautas, one big story people missed in the summer, perhaps?
Well, this has been flying a little bit under the radar. Mayor Wu and other progressive councilors and some labor unions have been putting together this coalition of progressives that are going to be on the ballot this fall. And that includes Councilor Louisiane, that includes Councilor Coletta, Henry Santana, who's a former Wu administration official. He's running for one of the at-large seats. So that's been fascinating to watch because it also... she's been holding fundraisers for a number of them and giving the support. And it's interesting to watch who she isn't giving such overt support to, which includes Councilors Arroyo, Lara, and Mejia.
The ones we tend to read about most as the council's dysfunction plays out in real time.
And Councilor Mejia is one of the folks on the council who's vocally critical of the mayor.
Okay. Let's look ahead to big stories that may be popping in the fall. And Steph, I'm going to come back to you. What's the biggest story that you think people should be watching as we get back to life as usual?
Well, we have potentially a lot of tax revenue coming in this fall with sports betting because football season is around the corner. And that is prime time for sports books around the country. So it will be one more or less true test to see how our system is going to compare to other states. especially when there's millions of dollars of tax revenue hinging on it.
You know, that's another thing, sort of like the unemployment benefits that caused a big stir when we saw the first numbers, and then it seems like people just moved on. I've been trying, and you may well have, all of you may have, trying to get some numbers on problem gambling from the state when it comes to sports betting, and I believe that they are planning to release those numbers later on in the fall as well. So that'll be interesting to see in conjunction with the football-based revenues.
Yeah.
Katie Lannan, big thing for people to keep an eye on moving forward?
Back in the category of unfinished business, both branches of the state legislature have been talking about doing something on gun reform, and there has been a lot of pushback from gun owner advocacy groups, Second Amendment groups, on a bill that originally surfaced in the House. And there's also been some House-Senate strife over which committee is best suited to vet that bill and what the procedural approach should be. It's also, gun reform is an issue that Governor Maura Healey has talked about. Attorney General Andrea Campbell has talked about banning ghost guns, those untraceable home-assembled firearms, which was a component of the bill we saw come out from House leadership. So it's going to be interesting to see on a few fronts, which is, one, what direction does Massachusetts ultimately want to go on further gun laws? Two, can the House and the Senate find common ground at a time where they seem to be increasingly at odds with each other? And three, what kind of political capital are we going to see some of the state's top statewide elected officials expend here?
By which you mean AG Andrea Campbell and Governor Maura Healey.
That's right.
Every time, I feel like every time you're on here, I try to push you into a very reductive assessment of how the House stacks up to the Senate ideologically and whether they've become more similar than they used to be. But is this a case, am I right to say this is a case where you've got a progressive, broadly speaking, piece of legislation? As you mentioned, it's being pushed by the House, and the resistance in part is coming, I think, from Senate Ways and Means Chair Michael Rodrigues, right? He's a skeptic?
I think there's some skepticism there. He comes from a purpler part of the state in some cases, but there's a lot of questions that senators in general have raised about the House bill and about some of the measures contained in it, and we haven't seen them tip their hand yet. We don't know what a Senate counter proposal or a Senate standalone gun bill might look like, so we don't quite know yet if they're going to pursue something differently ultimately, which is probably another unsatisfying answer for you.
No. It's a good reminder that I shouldn't be as glib and facile, as reductive as I sometimes am. All right, Gin, what is your story for people to keep tabs on moving forward?
A little personal, but MBTA. I actually I took the commuter rail to get here, and the commuter rail is actually part of the system that's functioning not that badly. It's really, the slow zones on the heavy subway and elsewhere that are really causing a lot of issues. And this is not just an inconvenience. This is an economic impact. A lot of workers, if it's a pain and a hassle to get downtown, get to work, that disincentivizes them.
Yeah, gives you a reason to stay home, right?
Yeah, exactly. Work from home, which depresses economic impact on the downtown area and elsewhere, or even drives people to the suburbs and more car usage, which isn't going to help any environmental goals. So watching the MBTA and kind of what happens, we still don't have a timeline for when these slow zones are going to get eliminated. That's something to watch. What
has your experience been? I'm curious. You're a red line power user, am I right?
Used to be, yeah.
Used to be. Okay, so what's the red line been like when you've taken it?
Well, it's horrendous. It's long, 20-minute waits sometimes. Just getting, it used to take me a half hour to get to my house to a haircut in Quincy, and that doubled to an hour. So at one point, I think I actually walked from Quincy Center to my barber in Wollaston, and I beat the train and I beat the bus.
That's so does me. I always used to think that I could beat the green line if I wanted to race it. I've thought that for years. I've never actually done it, but you shouldn't be able to beat any other line on the team, I don't think, personally. All right. Gintautas Dumcius, Steph, Solis, and Katie Lannan. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
Thanks.